Traditionally in game art, triangles work just fine if used wisely. And at low resolutions, they are simply unavoidable. Don't kill yourself trying to make an all quad model because that's often just a waste of time and polygons. Sometimes triangulation is even preferable because you can describe the same shape with fewer polygons. In this example here, you can see that if you just examine the outside edge, they are actually quite comparable. There's the same number of divisions, these facets going around, but the one on the left is fewer polygons than the one on the right. This is 128 versus 140. It's not a huge difference, but it just goes to show how using triangles can help you be more optimized. If you look at the quads here, and if you were to triangulate it, each of these faces, you could see that if you look at the silhouette edge, these two polygons don't make a difference in the shape of that plane. Whereas here, every triangle is describing a different plane. So, I mean, that's not to say that you should always go for something like a geosphere when you're building stuff, but there will be times when you're making some things where it does make more sense to do something like this rather than like that. And part of that's just comes with experience. However, keeping your model in quads as much as you can, it does make it generally easier to work with from both a modeling and rigging standpoint. When you have your model more in quads, it's easier to do things like, stuck edge rings, stuck edge loops, and then, if you wanted to bevel or, things like that. It's easier to add geometry and take it away and select things. Whereas, if it was triangulated, there's only so much you can really do easily. I mean, there are always workarounds, but it's more difficult to edit. And also, riggers would probably prefer something like this if this were something that needed to be animated, because it's easier for someone who's skinning this to assign weight values, and also to more predictably see how things will deform. So it really boils down to what the needs are, not just your own needs, but down the pipeline, who else is going to be using the model. I think it's safe to say, though, that unless your model is going to be subdivided, or you are going to be using some displacement map tessellation, or have some really complex animation needs, that most of the time triangles are just fine. And if you try to keep your model mostly quads, and then a triangle here and there, just to make things easier for yourself, then I think that's probably the best approach in most cases. Your model will be triangulated once it is drawn in the game engine, regardless of whether or not you use any quads. One thing you should keep in mind is that the way the engine triangulates your mesh may be different from how a program like Maya or XNormal will triangulate it. Normally this isn't a big deal, but it can become a factor if you have stressed non-planar quads. And to illustrate that, let's take a look at this this model right here. I have a partial retopology going on, and if I turn off the high poly mesh, you can see, particularly on this face right here, that this quad is not planar. It's being bent like this. And the way Maya triangulates it is like this. You see the line going down like that. If you look at it from this side, You can see you get some curvature in there. But if you look at the way XNormal triangulates it, you see here the silhouette is different. You see by the outline that instead of triangulating it this way, I'm sorry, not XNormal, Marmoset triangulated it this way. And that's not the only face where that's happening. For whatever reasons, each application has its own, I don't know, I guess it's some kind of algorithm on how it decides to triangulate things, and it's not going to be consistent. So in order for things to show up the way you want it to, not just from low polygon silhouette point of view, but also how your normal map will bake, because if you look at the normals here, Maya is going to calculate, if you bake your normal map in Maya, it's expecting the low polygon normals to be going like this in this area. But if you took it to XNormal or something like that, and if it thought that this was what you wanted, then you can see the normals are different. So your normal map is gonna bake differently because of that. And if you look at this model here, it's not gonna be a huge difference. But if this model had something like stripes or some kind of detail like that, then those stripes could end up being kind of wobbly, or it just wouldn't look as clean as if things were consistent throughout. If you had kept the same triangulation throughout your pipeline, the results would be a lot more predictable. So just a good reason to put some triangulation in there yourself if you think it's necessary. In this case, I probably would just triangulate myself just to make sure that things are gonna work out the way I expect them to. And usually what I do is, I bake my normal maps within Maya, so that's not a big deal. But when I export this low polygon model to to another program, like either the game engine or like XNormal to bake AO, then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and triangulate the whole thing, and then I'll export this as the low poly OBJ. Just because I know that if I exported it in quads like this, that however the other program reads it may be different. Although retopology applications such as 3D Coat, Topogun, things like that, they are really good for quickly laying down geometry very accurately, because you're working right on the surface of the high resolution mesh. Everything you draw is intended to stick right on the surface. But for that same reason, these programs may not be the best solution if you're trying to create the most optimized model. I think when you're working in a program like this, it can be difficult to really generalize a complex shape. So you feel like you need to put in polygons in order for things to look good within this application. Kind of like this hook shape here. I feel like whenever I'm doing this in a program like 3D Coat, I feel like I need to add a lot more geometry to satisfy my own needs for making it look good within 3D Coat. But I know if I was to do this in Maya, I probably would have just did something more drastic. I probably would have just moved it right off of the surface, like this, just to really generalize the shape, because I know that the normal map will take care of most of the detail in there. And I think that's just a good reason to not settle for what you get right out of your Rutapao program. I think it's always a good idea to take a pass on your model in your traditional 3D modeling application of choice, such as Max or Maya, and not only because of optimization, but I think when you are retopoing in a program like this, there's a tendency for your model to kind of lose something in translation as it goes from the high poly to the low poly, because you're sticking very strictly to the surface. It's but you don't have enough polygons to match the high res exactly. There's something that kind of gets lost. Your model feels a little bit dumbed down and losing a little bit of the flair. At least I think that's what happens on my models whenever I rely too heavily on the Retopo programs. So afterwards, I'll bring it back into Maya and really try to massage things to make sure that the low poly model captures the essence of what I had intended on the high poly model.